Hello, everyone. So I recently had a discussion with the team about Google's knowledge graph, knowledge panels, and named entities. So I thought, listen, this is a good opportunity. Let's make a short video about it. I'll share my screen and show you a bit, everything that's possible, and my thoughts on the subject, and how we, as a team, go about building things that are interesting and useful for SEO, GEO, in terms of the knowledge graph, named entities, and Google's perception of entities. So this is a client case. A client made a request about this, so we responded to it. Obviously, in this video, we're going to cover everything related to this topic: knowledge graph, named entity, GEO, ChatGPT, knowledge, panel, Wikipedia, Wikidata. We have a lot of topics we'll be able to cover today because all of these are interesting subjects. I made a web page just to have something a bit more appealing than the usual black background I tend to show you. So who am I? My name is Leo Poitvin, and I'm the manager of an SEO agency called Astrak. We do quite a few things there, but especially geo, and it's this approach that's going to be interesting for us today. What we call geo is basically SEO for ChatGPT and AIs, and there's one thing that's critical now, as we often say, it's very important to start paying attention to it right away. Because right now, there's a huge amount of growth on ChatGPT, and you should know that ChatGPT is being used a lot. There are certain sources that are extremely widely used, and we'll be able to take a look at that. Which ones in particular are used the most? Especially, let's see, what do we find as the second most used source? The most used source across all LLMs worldwide is Wikipedia. So Wikipedia has an outsized importance. And as a result, I have a personal quest to have my own Wikipedia page for myself or my business. And you'll see that all of this fits into that logic. One of the first things I wondered was whether I could buy a Wikipedia page. That's not really possible. It's very complicated to get a Wikipedia page these days. But there are other things that exist that you can buy, that you can pay for, which can strengthen your authority in the knowledge graph. And I'm going to show them to you little by little. Basically, in AI and SEO, ChatGPT's recommendations in terms of sources use several things. I'm going to show you several things. So here, there's an article. I can't remember who told us this. In this case, maybe it was Visual Capitalist or someone else who told us that Visual Capitalist is the second source. There's another one, a deep study, which tells us that Wikipedia is the primary source with almost 50% of citations, depending on the studies you look at, the prompts you use, etc. So the importance of having a Wikipedia page is quite significant. And in this case, fakes are particularly complicated. So I'm going to show you a bit of everything we can do to try to strengthen this and get a little closer to it. To be cited more often by LLMs and to be better referenced in geo, having clients who come through TGPT is quite simple. So there are really two systems that currently exist on ChatGPT. I'm going to talk to you about one of them today, the first of the two, which is the entity knowledge graph system. This is a system that is particularly interesting to look at in the long term. It's something that is very solid, very long term, and very important. In the short term, there is system number two, which is the recommendation and mention system, which is also very interesting, and honestly, the one we work on even more efficiently. But today, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the part concerning entity knowledge graph. If you want to see a bit about the recommendations and mentions part, how we bring brands to the forefront, there are several videos on my channel or on the channel I share with Romain. If you search for Romain and Leo SEO, you should find us, where you'll see some interesting things on that topic. We have plenty of use cases where we do very effective things regarding mentions. So there you go. I could talk to you about it in more depth later on. But today we're going to talk about knowledge graph entities, which are more of a foundational effort to get referenced in geo, because there are no hacks for that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of work to be done. At this point in time, there are a set of sites, a number of sites that Google trusts, in particular, sites that Google has a lot of confidence in, and they're quite limited. So here I put 20 or 30. The reality is there are probably more than that. But with this, you have a good list of sites that are very important to Google. These are sources that we would call high priority sources. Sources that are really important for Google. I'll give you some examples, but Wikipedia is a typical case. Wikidata is also one of them. CrunchBase is another example as well. TrustPilot is also part of this group. And these are sources that Google tends to bring up more easily than any other source. And as it happens, GPT will regularly go to these sources and draw inspiration from them. I had already started working on this topic a year ago with what we called knowledge panels. I could show you an example of a knowledge panel, but I'll show you very quickly. With the Eiffel Tower, for example, the Eiffel Tower, it's a classic. Here, you can see it directly. We have it right here. In the knowledge graph, we end up with this Eiffel Tower that appears here. Thank you. Historic site Paris. So we know it's something that has been included. Google has the complete perception. And so here we have the knowledge panel. So there you go. It's everything you see on the right here, which is provided directly by Google. And these are pieces of information that sometimes come from other sites, sometimes from other sources. But basically, it's Google that has decided to display it here. And that's not always the case. But sometimes for certain topics where it has a lot of information that is very high quality and highly reliable, it will display a knowledge panel here. So basically the knowledge panel is this card you see on the right, and it has a certain value because essentially a knowledge panel, so this panel that appears on the right, is something that is important. That means Google has a good understanding of who we are, what we do, that it can say where we come from, what address we're located at, etc. Somewhat naturally, and that it trusted that we are a real entity, something real that exists in the real world, and not just a website or someone who claims something, etc. So that's really something that's actually important. So Gemini, who's going to be there? Present sometimes on the multi-source section, so in the little about part. And sometimes, often, we get a lot of data from Wikipedia, but sometimes Gemini will do little things here, mixing data from several sites, etc. So it's quite interesting for this part, which used to be completely delegated to Wikipedia, and now there are several sites that can be taken into account. We have the KaliCube site, which is quite interesting. I'll show you. It's a very interesting site to find out whether you're present in the knowledge panel or not. Thank you, Jason, for making this for us. So where's the KaliCube thing for the knowledge panel? I'll find it for you. KaliCube Knowledge Graph Explorer. Here's the URL. And here you can directly type something, a name, and see whether it is present or not in the knowledge graph, in the knowledge panel. So when I type in Leopold 20 here, for example, we'll see that Leopold 20 is an entity that is present in the knowledge graph. There you go, person sign. We have a high level of confidence. And if you click on it, there you go. It brings you back to my profile, which notably includes 3 social profiles, whereas my knowledge panel is very limited. So this is my knowledge panel. It's very limited. It only shows my social profiles, but there's not much else. I can claim it here, even though I've already claimed it, to add a photo, to define, to tell them here, this is what should be highlighted, etc. Personally, I'm a bit unlucky because I have several declared under my name, so it's a bit of a mess. That means I have a second one here and so on. And actually, I only have 2, but there are even more because sometimes Google gets a bit mixed up with the number of things we report to it. And that can create some small problems. We'll talk about that a bit later. But you also need to make sure you have things that are very clean and always used in the same way, just to unify everything. You should know that if you have a very good position in a large company, if you have significant notoriety, etc., you can get a knowledge panel. That's generally how you get a knowledge panel. There are other solutions that exist. But the first thing to know is if you want to get a knowledge panel naturally, how do you go about it? And the first steps are basically, if you have a Wikipedia page, it's almost guaranteed you'll get one right away. So that's almost, I often see that, the knowledge graph, the knowledge panel as something that comes before Wikipedia. But if you go directly through Wikipedia, theoretically, the knowledge panel will be associated. You'll appear on the right with your knowledge panel via Wikipedia. It's kind of the source, the best source, but also the most difficult to obtain. If you already have significant notoriety and you don't have a Wikipedia page, you can contact me. We can look into that. I have experts who know how to work on that and who will be able to get you featured on Wikipedia, who will do a little assessment for you to see if it's viable or not. Next, we'll look at Wikidata, which is always something very important and much easier to get into than Wikipedia. But it has become more difficult recently, so that's something to note and to approach with caution. But Wikidata is something that's still fairly easy to do. CrunchBase, as we mentioned earlier, if you have a website with a well-structured about page, that's very interesting. If you're on Google News, that's very interesting too. The LinkedIn page is something that's very important for personal knowledge panels. And there are other things as well. There's Amazon, which is widely used, Spotify, Zoom, Info. For companies, there's Glassdoor, there's TrustPilot, which I mentioned earlier, IMDb, as soon as we're talking about movies, actors, and so on, Goodreads for books. So all of these are, in a way, directories or places where you want to be listed. These are reference points that are going to be important. Here, as you can see, I've listed a few sources each time with some information. So you can go take a look. I'll try to put the link to this page below the video. I also have 2 very important ones for companies, etc. So each time there are many sources that are very important and that actually allow you quite simply to tell Google, this is a source you can trust. This is a source you have confidence in. There you go. I'm present on it. I'm present on it only once. I have a profile that is filled out and complete. You can use that profile and cross-reference it between the Couchbase profile, the Wikidata profile, the Wikipedia profile, the Spotify profile, etc. To verify, cross-check all of that and compare it with data that will be reliable and that you can rely on. Google's goal with its knowledge graph and knowledge panel is to create a database that is reliable for itself, one it can rely on. And the purpose of having profiles everywhere on all these platforms is precisely to achieve that legendary reliability so that Google can rely on it, display our knowledge panel on the side, and strengthen our website, its ranking, and give it that official site status, etc. This will create fewer problems in the future. What exactly are we deploying? That's a good question. The first thing I do personally, as you can see here, is that we have quite a few things related to social profiles. So these are kind of social profiles. Here we don't have Instagram or Facebook, but the reality is that Instagram, Facebook, and similar platforms are going to be interesting to include. So the first thing we do is create social profiles on a large scale. We use SEO Builder for that, which is honestly a great solution. I think they had a promo code Leo, but I'm not sure at all, or maybe Poitevin, I'm really not sure. I'd have to check and verify that. It's not very expensive to create a huge number of social profiles. And we use this platform, we rely on it to deploy this on a large scale. It's worth noting that social profiles are also very interesting for this part. Link building, because on each social profile, there's a backlink that points to our site. Sometimes it's follow, sometimes no follow, sometimes not indexed due to issues. We'll actually reindex them with indexes, but that's another story. And so know that this allows us to create hundreds of backlinks, which is what we call foundational link building. It's kind of the foundation of a website. It's what creates the basic coherence and stability. So we work on that and we generally create this for our clients. To start, you need something that kickstarts things a bit with a lot of social profiles. So that's the first step, which is very important for maintaining consistency, uniformity everywhere with citations everywhere, which will allow you to have citations. NAP, your business name, business address, and phone number are very, very important locally, a little less so nationally, but still important. And this will tie in especially with a Google My Business listing, which can sometimes be very important for the knowledge graph part. Indeed, Google relies heavily on Google My Business data to create entities in the knowledge graph and to generate knowledge panels. Almost every site that has a listing on Google Maps, Google Business, or Profile will end up having a dedicated knowledge panel at that point. The two will overlap significantly. These are basically the two things that are free or that you can get more efficiently by paying a bit, which will allow you to have an entity faster, more efficiently. And since Google cross-references a lot of sources, which ones does it trust? The ones it trusts. The Wikidata entry, that's something that's quite interesting. And in this case, we have a small service provider that we usually use on Legit, which is an SEO platform. I don't know if our provider is still up to date. I'll have to test it again and check, but it's a provider I've used a few times myself personally to try it out for my own situation. Unfortunately, the sources I gave it weren't sufficient, so my entry got deleted, unfortunately. Wikidata, for your information, is kind of the database behind Wikipedia. Where Google uses Wikipedia's data network for its knowledge graph, Wikipedia itself uses Wikidata as its database. It's kind of the source of the source. It's less trusted, more like a drawer with all the information rather than something direct. It's not the thing that's interesting, visited, relevant, or impactful, but it serves as a precursor to everything. So in this case, Wikidata is extremely interesting. You can buy it. In this case, there is someone who can do it for you. You can do it yourself, but it's always very difficult to create a page, I find, on Wikipedia or Wikidata, since there are so many things to know in terms of rules, formatting, etc. So generally, I can have someone do it for a fee. It doesn't cost much, around $20 or $30. There's someone who can do it for you. Unfortunately, if you don't have the required notability, it won't last. You don't need the same level of notability as on Wikipedia. It's not monitored as closely, but you still need a certain level of notability. Then what I very often do is what I call a Wikilinks pack. So the Wikilinks pack is basically links on CrunchBase, links on other things that are in there. I think there's G2 in there sometimes, etc. So several links in things like that. And we also have notably WikiAlpha, a fandom, etc. So these are wiki-like sites that are quite interesting. Just for your information, a lot of speakers from Changma SEO have mentioned this to me several times. And it's something that's quite important to go and get links on mini wikis. It allows you to create a sort of pseudo credibility with Google. In my opinion, we all kind of hope that since we're on something like Wiki Alpha or Wiki People, Google will pick it up a bit like we've seen with the recent emergence of Wikipedia. So there you have it. Not sure if it's really effective, but I think there's still something important there. And know that I'm doing this for myself. So I'm sharing my methods, what I do, and the work I'm currently doing. Next, we have this question of knowledge panel enterprise. A really nice enterprise knowledge panel. It can theoretically be done quite easily. So let's hope this guy is still active and still running and perfect. So I use this guy for the listings, Wikipedia. Let me show you, this is the knowledge panel for people. So if you're a person and you have a nice knowledge panel like this, as you saw, my knowledge panel is a bit lighter than this one. But anyway, there you go. Let's not bite the hand that feeds us. And there's the enterprise knowledge panel. So I'll see if I can find one. It's not here. Let's try to do it with a well-known company. Let's take Safran, for example. And Safran will have an enterprise knowledge panel here, which looks a bit like the one for the Eiffel Tower, but is a bit more traditional, notably with subsidiaries, the CEO, in short, information that it is 100% certain about. That's always what's important. And each time we'll have others, related searches, things that are associated within the knowledge graph in terms of proximity in this knowledge graph. So that's quite interesting and quite important because we'll see all of this on Wikipedia very often, of course. And now, if we take another one to the east, there we go. Here we end up with a small knowledge panel with interesting information, the CEO, sometimes the stock price, sometimes lots of other things can show up, but it's quite interesting to have that. So there you have it. Roughly speaking, that's what we'll get in terms of the knowledge panel. As for the enterprise knowledge panel, the best way is to create it naturally by having a lot of elements on many different sites that we mentioned earlier, which all have the same data, etc. But here too, there are people who can take care of creating it for us. I don't know exactly what method they use in this case, but I do know it's something they can do. And finally, the Google My Business section, which I've already talked to you about, but which is very important for local SEO because it helps you rank better. Simply by ranking with GMB, we have Stefan Madaleno's study from May 2024, which shows us that all sites with GMB listings rank much better locally. And basically nearly 7 out of 10 local results are people who have a GMB listing in the area. So Google delegates its validation algorithm to methods like GMB, to methods like the knowledge panel, to methods like Wikidata, Wikipedia. And our goal is kind of to tell it, look, my site is a real entity. It's a good site. It's validated. You can see it because of this. So there you have it. Basically, GMB is also very important, especially if you're a local business, because it's even more crucial. One important point to make is that I've talked to you about a lot of directories. What I call directories are sites that, well, you know, all that, they're sites that list a lot of things. For me, a site that lists a huge number of things is more or less a directory. In particular, if there isn't a search engine, it's still a site that lists things, but it's more of a search engine. In this case, it's more about directories where you can find lots of listings, lots of things that are all connected to each other. So for me here, we're talking about sites, services, directories. Sometimes there are things, reference points, but you see waycombina.tor, for example, is more of a directory. Well, it's a company that does something, but it also serves as a business directory, etc. So there are lots of things here that are directories, reference directories. And it's going to be important to make a clear distinction between the directories. Traditional classic SEO directories that we used to use in the past, which are backlink directories, etc. I don't remember exactly which ones those were, but basically they were sites that served as directories back in the day, a long time ago, and that allowed you to have your site listed as a reference there. For me, that's interesting for that part. SEO for the part about backlinks, authority, link juice, etc. Even though a lot of people say directories, you shouldn't use them, etc. Personally, I still think directories are important because they provide €2 links with high DR and so on. Obviously, they don't generate traffic. We don't buy them for that. We only use them for de-optimized links. But it's useful to have backlinks gradually coming to a site because Google still crawls them anyway, given the authority they have. And it helps to create a bit of link juice and initial traction. So we still use directories. And I still tell my team to buy directory listings from time to time for new sites, just to create a bit of an initial launch. But in this case, what we want, these are directories that we call high entity value directories, meaning directories that are really very important which may not necessarily provide SEO benefits, but will strengthen the entity aspect for Google because Google trusts them. In France, for example, we have the Yellow Pages, which is an important directory. We have TrustPilot, which is very important. We have Yelp, which is huge in the US. We have TripAdvisor, which is a leading reference in travel and all that. But we also have other interesting things, especially geographic and national data, etc. Mapbox, OpenStreetMap, MapQuest, and so on. So if you can get listed in things like that, it's honestly interesting. And there are several others in France. I haven't mentioned them all, but that one came to mind, the Yellow Pages. It's particularly interesting. The Yellow Pages, which are actually taken over by Mappy afterwards anyway, but it's pretty solid. So you really need to distinguish between traditional directories and entity directories, which are much cleaner directories, etc., compared to traditional spammy SEO directories. So there you have it. And sometimes they require validation. Sometimes like you need to have a call with someone to get listed in a directory, entity directories, because in fact, that's exactly the value of that barrier. At the entry point, there's a bit of friction, a double check they do on their end, just like Google does. That and a solid historical authority. Wikipedia remains the holy grail, the most important one. My goal while trying to get a Wikipedia page for myself, for several of my clients, we've already done it for several of our clients. By the way, one for sure. I've talked quite a bit with another one that's in progress. So there you go. We're working on all of that right now anyway. And if you have a major issue with that, and by the way, I've also advised big clients on this topic. So we have several cases where we have real issues on this subject. So we have several situations where we understand that it's important. A major issue concerns training data. For example, GPT-3 at the time was trained mostly on Wikipedia, 3%. That might seem like a small amount to you, but it's huge when you consider the scale of the web. And we see that there is a lot of content that even for myself, when I do research on GPT or, that comes up often, 50% of the top citations in this case, according to what is said in a study, I can't remember exactly which one, and we have a lot of material that will come up. One thing to know is that an expired domain that has a listing, Wikipedia, for example, that has a knowledge panel, that has a GMB, these are Wikipedia listings, expired domains that stand out more, that rank better, that are more effective. And with our clients, we see it too. As soon as they have all this legitimacy, which is the real EAT, in reality, the true EAT is that. Often people talk about EAT, they make a little listing, author. Yes, but if your author isn't referenced anywhere, if they don't have that credibility, that knowledge panel, your author doesn't really have any relevance, and having an author profile is useless. So the goal is precisely to create all of that, to build that relevance. And it's thanks to that that real EAT happens. And Wikipedia is the ultimate goal of your real EAT. That's why I work on it so much, because the day you're referenced on Wikipedia, you've kind of created a barrier, you've set up a huge barrier to entry, and that's what it allows. So basically, these are the kinds of things we're working on to try to move up in SEO, obviously. Extremely important. There are a lot of things that are going to be important. I won't list them all for you, but basically, as soon as the AGBT doesn't have all the information, it will search all over the place. It will look for things it considers to be reliable sources, and it will do things on Wikipedia, Wikidata, GMB, etc. So we have a lot of things on this topic. There are patents from Google and Microsoft regarding the knowledge graph that you can check out if you're interested. Here, I've included some sources from Search Engine Land who have done quite a few interesting things. But basically, having a lot of entities and consistent NAPs, no. Address and phone number that are always the same everywhere. That allows them to quickly unify everything. I talked quite a bit with a guy named Romain in Bangkok, and he managed to create knowledge panels for people who didn't exist. So in this case, I'll show you someone who has a knowledge panel that I really like and with whom I discussed this topic a bit. But it's Sylvain Perronnet, who is a very well-known SEO, very good with algorithms. Thank you. Who has a nice knowledge panel. And so the Romain I met in Bangkok at a Geo conference, he managed to create the equivalent of this knowledge panel for people who didn't exist. So that was pretty impressive. I told him, wow, you did really well. We talked a bit, we discussed all that, and we really agreed on this part. CrunchBase, we were really in agreement about these defined sources. And he had created a huge amount of information about many things around his persona, around his fake person, to create that. So very well played by him. And honestly, he did a good job on that. And we can see that it's possible to create from scratch. One thing I really don't recommend creating from scratch because it will require 100 times more effort than using your own persona. But if you want to create a knowledge panel in your name, don't hesitate to contact me. I'd be happy to help. We'll look into it and see what we can do together. So a lot of things, the APR is very important, as is press relations. This is something that is very important because a lot of major media outlets will be involved. They will be important sources for Wikipedia, important sources for TGPT, for Google. So don't hesitate to do PR. It helps you strengthen your EAT. I don't want fake PR that serves no purpose on third-rate media. Go for things that are truly interesting, and you need to have a real strategy, proper PR. Otherwise, we can do it ourselves. We can manipulate it from more of an SEO perspective, but there you go. So this brings up quite a few interesting things. It's worth noting that there are about 2 or 3 topics in there. There's a topic around Google and there's a topic around ChatGPT. So these are really 2 things that are interesting and important, and also around e-reputation in relation to Google. And there are kind of 2 things that will come in parallel. On one hand, we have the Wikipedia part, which is important for long-term strategy and for credibility and for ET. And on the other hand, we have more mentions from listicles, Reddit, forums, etc. That's also where we take action and get explosive results. In just 2 or 3 weeks, we're able to achieve things that are extremely powerful, but which, in my view, are a side issue, something parallel and not exactly the same as the traditional Wikipedia challenge. So with that, I've finished my explanation on the topic and on what we're currently working on. I'll try to put the URL for this little recap, this small thing, directly in the description, so you can check it out if you want. But in any case, it was a pleasure to present this to you. And I hope it will help you with this part, Wikipedia, Wikidata, knowledge graph, named entity, and so on.